Welcome in to the next and newest episode of the Nerds Ruin Sports podcast. I am joined by my great, amazing co-host, Anders Pryor. Anders, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Great's a new one. I got to start writing these down. We're at like 6 now, I think. I'm doing good. Zach and I were talking before we started recording. And you guys can comment on this too about what kind of reality TV show what kind of reality TV we watch. And Zach asked me about if I would ever seriously consider doing reality TV, and Zach not only said yes, but had a specific show in mind, which I had never thought of. But yeah, what was it? The Circle?
It's The Circle on Netflix. Yes.
Yeah.
That would be a show I always want to do. So, I definitely would. I've actually gone to the application page for it and pressed on submit application, but I've never actually. But it was like they weren't taking applications at the time I did it. So I'm like, we'll wait for next year and then maybe try it. Yeah. But no, it's great. Absolutely. So this show, as you can see, we have a baseball background behind us. So this show will be a mainly baseball themed podcast. However, we do want to talk about the NBA free agency first because obviously some big moves are in NBA free agency. And I want to quickly bring up a topic that is a little bit closer to me, a little bit closer to home. As many of you guys know, I'm a Minnesota sports fan. Recently, Vikings cornerback Kyrie Jackson, who we drafted in the 4th round, passed away in a tragic car accident only a few days ago. He was an Oregon corner who we had a lot of really high hopes for. And it was not his fault. He was the victim of a drunk driving accident. He was the passenger seat in the car. A drunk driver kind of was flying down the road, hit him, and his car went into multiple tree stumps is the report, killing all 3 passengers inside, including Jackson. And so it's a really sad kind of story. And I just wanted to take a minute to remember him and kind of bring it up because he was an exciting player for our team. He was already kind of becoming a fan favorite. And he really had the chance to be a big name in the NFL. His story is fantastic. If you haven't heard his story, I recommend going and looking him up. He won Employee of the Month at a grocery store, before he kind of returned to football, and now he was going to be in the NFL and get his chance to play. So it's a really sad story, but I just want to bring that up and kind of just mention it. Please go look up Kyrie Jackson. He really was a great player, great guy. His interviews are really awesome and special, so go look him up. And yeah, just shout out to Kyrie. I was a big fan of him, and it's sad that his career ended and his life ended so early. So I just want to bring that up. But we will now get into NBA and the free agency specifically. There's been a lot of cool moves and a lot of big moves historically, and a lot of the moves have come. A lot of the teams that have made the big moves have come on the East Coast in the Eastern Conference. I feel like, especially at the top of the Eastern Conference, you have a lot of teams that are chasing those Celtics down for the NBA Finals. And 2 teams that I think have already had a fantastic free agency are the Knicks and the Sixers. And so, Anders, I wanted to ask you, who do you think has a better chance of the NBA Finals after their free agency, the Knicks or the Sixers? And before you answer, I kind of want to break down what they've done so far. So The Knicks, the main thing that they did was they traded for Mikal Bridges, a lot of picks to get him, but they traded for Mikal Bridges. They re-signed OG Anunoby, but they also lost Isaiah Hartenstein. And the Sixers signed Paul George, and I forget I think they extend Maxey as well, or not Maxey, but they
extended Maxey. They re-signed Oubre, and they lost a couple of smaller pieces. But yeah, those are the pillars of it.
Those are the pillars. So I want to ask, after this free agency, Anders, who do you think has a better chance at the NBA Finals?
So this is a great question because I think in terms of just the talent from the rosters, like 1 through 10, I would say collectively it's probably a wash. If you look at it, obviously we still need to see what the Knicks do at backup center if they make any kind of significant move. I know that there was a report that they had made an offer to the Jazz for Walker Kessler for 2 first-round picks, and the Jazz turned it down, which I thought was smart. I think that, but so I think in terms of talent, it's a wash. But in terms of getting to the finals, I would say the Knicks, because in my mind, and you even kind of mentioned this in the questioning, to get to the finals out of the East implies that you have likely beat Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think that the roster construction of the Knicks is far better equipped to do that in terms of how Boston kind of utilizes just having between White, Brown, and Tatum just 3 elite wings who can score and defend at a high rate. That, requires strong defensive perimeter presence. And I think that between OG and Mikal, right, who have both been on all defensive teams, Mikal a couple years ago being a runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, I think that with the tandem of OG and Mikal are better equipped to handle the kind of wing attack of Brown and Tatum more so than what the Sixers are capable of. Obviously, George is a stout defender, and he's picked up respect in that range too, but he's not quite in his athletic prime in the way that OG and Mikal are. And even then still, like, it's kind of just him. There isn't really anyone on the Sixers that on the perimeter in a one-on-one situation is kind of capable of that sort of defense. And so I would say the Knicks, as constructed, are better equipped to beat the Celtics, which I think is what you have to do to make the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping we'd have a little bit of different takes on this, but to be honest, I have the exact same take. I think the Knicks have the better chance to beat the Celtics. But in a matchup of Knicks versus Sixers, it's tough because the Sixers nearly beat the Knicks in that series last year, and they had a lot of close games go the wrong way in that series. But I have to think it's the Knicks in my mind, just simply because I think the talent that they added here in Mikal Bridges, I think he's a huge piece for them defensively, like you said. Yep. And they kept OG. I think that's a really key piece. I think the chemistry on the Knicks is just there, but you really have 2 teams here that have both struggled to stay healthy. I mean, the Sixers have always struggled to stay healthy. The Knicks last year were so hurt that they lost to the Pacers in that series simply because of injuries. Right. And so I would expect the Knicks if they can stay healthy. But again, it really comes down to health by that right. Playoff time. But I think depth-wise, I trust the Knicks more simply because I'm looking at it now like you're pretty much going to have Dante and Josh Hart both coming off the bench for you next year, as well as whoever you get for backup center. You'll have that off the bench as well. Yeah. And, I think their bench is so good that they, scoring points-wise. I look at the Sixers, and that was kind of a thing that always struggled with them last year, was especially last year, they didn't really have that bench playmaker that could really go out and just score a lot. The Knicks now have 2 guys that were key pieces for them scoring-wise coming off the bench this year, and Josh Hart and Dante.
It's kind of interesting. The Knicks, they didn't necessarily add depth, they just added starters, and that kind of pushes the starters down to almost create depth. But no, your point on the Sixers is fair. Like, Buddy Hield was kind of supposed to be that, they kind of added him at the deadline to kind of provide some 3-point shooting to keep the Sixers afloat, and then come to the playoffs and he plays a total of like 6 or 7 minutes in that entire series against New York. So, this obviously kind of pens, they add Jared McCain in the draft if he becomes the 3-point shooter that a lot of people think he can, including myself. Then I think that maybe that solves a little bit. Obviously, getting Oubre back was incredibly important, but I think in terms of 1 to 10, I trust the Knicks more. And even if you're willing to be skeptical, I understand the skepticism around the backup center with Mitchell Robinson's health, but assuming they add someone who's just kind of, serviceable, or, maybe Jericho Sims kind of unlocks a lot of that lob threat stuff that hasn't really been flaunted, I would trust them more too. I think you're right.
Absolutely. And then we'll move on to, I think, perhaps maybe the biggest move of the entire offseason so far. A move that, looking back like 7 years ago, even 5 years ago, you probably never expected to happen. And this would be Klay Thompson going to Dallas. I really started watching NBA around that Warriors team, around that Warriors dynasty team. I didn't watch NBA before. I didn't watch the playoffs before. That first playoffs I really watched was that 2015 Warriors when they went and won that. That was the first time I really ever watched the NBA playoffs. And kind of, I kind of grew up on this Warriors team. And so it's crazy to me to see Klay Thompson leaving Golden State. Obviously I expected it to happen now, like even like a couple months ago and stuff. Like you knew it was coming, but like 5 years ago, you wouldn't have expected this. You would have expected Klay Thompson to almost play his whole career in Golden State. So Anders, I just want to know, what are your biggest takeaways in this? I know you had a few things you wanted to talk about here. What are your biggest takeaways in this move?
Yeah, so I guess now at the beginning of the offseason, the Warriors emphasized that the number one objective for them was not even just to get under the apron, it was to get under the tax entirely. And I think so now they're kind of keeping their word on it. And it's kind of strange because, I know there's a lot of talk about how, they want to, because you don't want to pay all this tax money for a team that you don't think can compete. And that makes the Warriors offseason as a whole is really strange, because the direction, it seems, is kind of, it's difficult, right? Because you want to get under the tax, but then we see all these, they go out and get Buddy Hield and D'Anthony Melton and all that, and there's all these rumors that they're going to try and go get Zach LaVine and all this kind of stuff. Not Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen. You're trying to go get Lauri Markkanen. And there's different hypotheticals as surrounding the idea of who, could one of these moves be made with Klay still on the roster. And obviously that depends on, it was leaked that they offered him 2 years for $24 million. And so because of that, the answer is probably no. Because for a while, just based off the sign-in trade that happened, that like really complex, like 6-team sign-in trade.
Yeah.
Because before that was released, the thought in my mind was, oh my God, like how little did the Warriors offer him? Because I know that, Klay's contract in Dallas was 3 years for 50. And I know that there was like a thing where they got on the phone and had asked, is 2 years for 40 on the table initially? And they were like, we're not sure, before the 2 for 48. Excuse me. But yeah, it's really just strange because I think that this is, this is a very proactive move to break up the dynasty. And it would make sense to break up the dynasty if the point was to enter this sort of exempt from Steph rebuild, but they haven't because they've added Buddy Hield and D'Anthony Melton. Those are veteran players. And so now the whole thing just comes across as really directionless. And so I am having a little bit of trouble understanding what the full motivations of it are, because obviously Draymond's still there. It's complicated, and I feel like it shouldn't be with how the Warriors have been run. But Nick Wright made an excellent point. Which is that this was the end of the end for the Warriors, but the beginning of the end of the Warriors was the Draymond punch towards Jordan Poole, which is a trade that now that it's been fully cycled out, they got nothing for. And they rewarded him with an extension instead of Klay. They could have extended Klay right there, so I think it's kind of all bizarre, and I feel like this was – if you're going to try and get under the tax, acknowledging you're not going to compete, then there's no point in replacing Klay with all these sort of benign veteran signings for 1 year and 2 year deals. So I think it's all just very optically strange and just odd. And I feel bad for Klay because he didn't deserve that kind of sort of rough exit. And I could forgive it more if the direction for what they were trying to do was clear, but it isn't. And so I understand why he's frustrated.
No, yeah, I agree also. I think, again, like I said, I felt like this move was coming, though. I did feel Klay was not going to be back at the Warriors next year. I kind of felt that Klay was going to be gone and go test free agency, which was crazy. But I agree. It makes you really wonder, has Steph kind of alerted the Warriors that he might retire soon? And if so, have they kind of started to are they doing these 1 or 2 year deals to see if they can get one more with Steph there, and then see what happens after? Or I don't really know, but I'm wondering if Steph is kind of is considering retirement in the next couple of years, which would be crazy. Right. He's still kind of young and he's still playing really well, but you have to wonder if that's maybe what it is.
Well, I'll make a point and then I'll ask you a question. Leading into the 2022 title, they paid so much in tax money that's why now they're kind of, we ate our medicine. This is us eating our medicine. And so they're doing this sort of weird gymnastics of trying to compete basically for 80 cents on the dollar, which is just really kind of difficult to watch. And I feel like when we watch the Warriors this year, it's going to look sort of strange. I mean, they're basically kind of crossing their fingers that Podziemski turns into, him and Kuminga turn into perennial all-stars essentially. But my question to you is, because you brought up the sort of communication between Steph and the front office, between him and Mike Dunleavy, etc. Steph, I'm sure, has the agency within that organization to almost throw his body in front of the Klay Thompson sign-in trade, where he could have just said, no, you're not doing it. He has that pull. Are you surprised that he didn't? And do you think that he should have? Or do you think it's good that he did?
I wonder, if he knew the numbers behind it, because, I think for his friend, he'd probably want him to go get that bag. I think he'd want first round to still go get the money he can get. And if the Warriors were truly offering him pennies on the dollar compared to like what the Mavs gave him, which isn't even that much to be honest, like it's about 16.5 mil
Yeah,
a year.
16 and a half, 17 and a half, yeah.
Even if like that was the case, I'd find it hard to believe that Steph was like, saw maybe the Warriors offer him very little and was like, I don't want you to do this. And that would be kind of selfish for Steph to do that almost because Klay deserves to get paid and Klay deserves to still get his pay for what he's done. I don't know. I think money has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like Steph could have done this, but I think Steph honestly was also like seeing like maybe Klay needed to find a different spot. Maybe Klay needed to go on his own. And so it's sad to see the Splash Brothers kind of break up there. But on the other hand, it's like Klay wasn't really part of the Splash Brothers anymore. Like he wasn't doing what he needed to do late in that season. So it's hard to like say. It's hard to like stick up for a guy that has played so bad the last couple of years.
Right.
If you're Steph. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to see. But
Right.
again, I think Klay is going to be a really good piece for Dallas. I think he's going to be big for them come down the stretch. And I hope to see him like rejuvenate his career a little bit, even if it's for only a couple of years. Rejuvenate his career in Dallas. I hope to see that.
I'm rooting for him. I hope. I mean, my guess is that he feels some sort of satisfaction in emotional satisfaction and disconnecting entirely from Golden State, and so I'm rooting for him to receive that fully.
I agree. And so then finally, we have one more topic we're going to discuss here in the NBA before we go to our fun MLB segment, and that would be the Dejounte Murray trade. And so, as you guys don't know, Dejounte Murray was traded from the Hawks to the Pelicans. I'm gonna be honest, I don't have the exact trade off the top of my head, but I'm let me look here. Let me try to get this thing pulled up so I know it.
It was
Hawks acquired Dyson Daniels, EJ Liddell, Larry Nance Jr., Cody Zeller, and 2 future firsts in exchange for Dejounte Murray. Which to be honest doesn't seem like a ton.
no.
The Hawks gave up a lot more to get Dejounte Murray than they did to give away him.
Yep.
For sure, because as you guys know, Dejounte Murray was traded to the Hawks. I want to say like a year or 2 years before this. Was it last offseason or was it the year before that?
I think the year before that, maybe.
From the Spurs.
Yeah.
For a lot. So anyway, Anders, just expectations for the Pelicans after the Murray trade.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I'll start here. I don't have a ton of expectations for the Pelicans. I just don't think they are anywhere near the class of the West. And I find it very hard to believe that they are higher than a 5 seed in the West.
Right.
Or even higher than a 6 seed in the West, really.
So I think I think those numbers are fair. So I think that they will be, because I do like their coaching, and I liked their depth more when they had Dyson Daniels, and obviously Valanciunas is gone as well. But I do like their I like their roster now, because they were kind of at a crossroads where it's like, okay, well, do we trade Brandon Ingram and like fully just go all in on Zion, or do we keep him and try and get another piece in the building? And I think that this is them taking the former, because Valanciunas leaving means now that Yves Missy, who was a rookie out of Baylor that the Pelicans took at the 21st pick, he will likely be the starting center, and he's cheap. He's a late first rounder. he's not going to be particularly expensive. And so that gives them the room that they need to take on Murray's contract. And so I think, yeah, like with their starters now, that's going to be CJ McCollum, Zion, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, and well, actually, no, because I guess Herb Jones is still there. So it'll be CJ, Zion, Dejounte, Brandon Ingram, and Yves Missi, because you can't really have Brandon Ingram play the 5. So now Herb Jones and Trey Murphy are going to be coming off the bench, which I think is really going to be really interesting to see them two getting more minutes with like Alvarado, etc. And so, yeah, I think they'll be like a 5 or 6. I think they'll be firmly in the playoffs. But this was a team that had a very easy path to walk in terms of just kind of staying pat and running back the exact same thing, which wasn't going to do anything productive for them. The right thing to do was go one way or the other, and they were decisive, and Valanciunas leaving kind of gave them the breathing room they needed to really do that. So yeah. I think they're going to be really, really excited to watch. And I like Willie Green as a coach as well, so I'm excited to see what they do.
Absolutely. And I think absolutely. And like I said, I've never been high on the Pelicans just because I think their entire team, like the star of that team is Zion, obviously. And I just don't trust Zion to stay healthy. I don't trust Zion Zion really hasn't looked the part of what Zion was supposed to be. He's looked good, but he hasn't looked the part of anywhere near what he was supposed to be when he came out of NCAA, right? He's supposed to be this beast, this menace, this future Hall of Famer, and I don't think he's looked anywhere near that early. So it's hard for me to really believe in the Pelicans. But I'm so excited for our next segment here. We have been very much looking forward to this. As you guys know, we are approaching the All-Star break, and we officially hit the midpoint of the MLB season. So we want to do something special for this. We wanted to do something a little bit creative. And so we are doing our Mid-Season Awards Show, or as we like to call it, the Nerdies. And I can promise you that I did all these graphics about 20 minutes before the show. So, and I've never done graphics before. So, this is how it goes. But I'm very excited for this. And so there's about 8 awards here that we have, and we're kind of excited to kind of go through them, talk about them a little bit. We're also going to kind of share honorable mentions as we go along. But I'm very excited for this. This is going to be such a good segment. So, as we start here in the MLB Season Awards, let's go to our first award, which is the How About Those Fill in the Blank Award. And this award, Andrews created it, but I will explain it here. This award goes to the team. Actually, I will let Andrews explain this one because Andrews created it. So I'll let Andrews explain
This basically is the award for the team that has exceeded expectations in sort of a very sustainable way, when it doesn't really look like they're not on you're not on a hot streak where it's like, have you seen what the so-and-so has done in the past, whatever, we're at more than the halfway point now. And, a team that has sustained some success, and we have to really sit back, and we have a large enough sample where it's like, man, how about those blanks? So it's an exceeding expectations and then maintaining at that level in a way that, kind of supersedes just what we saw at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely. And yes. And so with the How About Those award, the first ever Nerdy award, we will be giving it to the Cleveland Guardians. The Cleveland Guardians have been the best team in baseball, or one of the best teams in baseball this entire season. They haven't had a slump. They've been so incredibly good, just offensively, pitching, everything's been going right for this Guardians team in the first half of the season, that they are now leading the American League in the record column. And they're second in the majors as well in terms of record. And this is just so above and beyond where I think people thought the Guardians were going to be at. However, and so Anders, what are your thoughts on the Guardians? And I know you had another team that you were also considering for this award, but what were your thoughts on the Guardians?
Yeah, no. So I think this is a great pick. I mean, this is, this is coming from me because I did not have super high aspirations for the Guardians. I thought that, they sort of lacked the power, sort of needed to, win games on other ways that outside of just winning 3-1, but their offense has been great. And, with that kind of contact style of offense, you sort of need multiple people to be in that like 275, 280 plus range. And they've sustained that. So it's a super, big shot to them. They're pitching, young pitching, homegrown. McKenzie's had, a rough patch, but they've done essentially everything that they've needed to do and accomplish to sort of fulfill the South that they are. As Zach mentioned, I was thinking of someone else. I had picked the Royals initially as my pick for this award, primarily because, I feel like in the baseball community, we have this sort of understanding that Cleveland is a consistently well-run, well-developed organization. And so even though the roof is higher for Cleveland, I think that the gap that's been accomplished by the Royals specifically is much wider. And a lot of people, expected them to take a little bit of a leap, but no one expected them to be in like firm playoff contention coming into the All-Star break, which is what they are. And, a lot of people thought that the moves like getting Seth Lugo and Michael Walker and Hunter Renfroe were these like weird moves where they were just kind of spending just to say they could spend. But, Seth Lugo especially, all those moves have been largely, productive and effective in terms of surrounding Bobby Witt with the infrastructure that he needs to be comfortable playing the style that he's so good at. And so that would have been my pick, but yeah, no, you reward the ceiling. Obviously, Stephen Vogt comes in and does a great job. He'll probably get the AL Manager of the Year nod. And no, I've been surprised. They've been really cool to watch.
Absolutely. And I will say the Royals have been very good, and I think the entire AL Central has definitely surprised a lot of people with how good that Central is, because the Royals are like having one of the best seasons in years. They're 50-43 and they're third place in the division, which is crazy. And the Central has 3 teams very easily above 500 already. And so I think this is really fun division to watch come down the stretch. And while I choose the Guardians here, I think they've been very good. I think the Royals definitely have a more sustainable path where they're at now. I think the Guardians will eventually have a slump because they haven't had one yet, and you can't make it through a 162-game season without a little bit of a slump, and we have not seen that yet from the Guardians, so I expect them to have a little bit of a slump soon, maybe after the All-Star break. So that will but I still think for that first half of the season you have to go with the Guardians. Moving on to our next award, Anders. This is another award Anders created. It's the They Couldn't They award. And Anders, I would love to have you explain this one as well. I know you created it, so
got a new piece of gum for this award. I gotta chew. I'm gonna chew my way through this here. So They Couldn't They is an award that goes to a team that at this point we are all saying, like, at the beginning of the year, maybe not quite a playoff team. They're going to take a little bit of a leap, small leap, did some good stuff last year, but they're not really a playoff team. And it doesn't look like that right now, but in recency, it's like there's no way they could actually pull off a playoff berth, which is where they couldn't they, comes from. And this is
Would you like to announce the award, Anders?
Oh, I'd love to announce the award. The recipient goes to Zach. Show him, please. The Washington Nationals. This is a little bit hot take territory for me, baseball wise, but I think that the Nationals are in legitimate playoff contention, and I think that the numbers for that are not entirely unrealistic because, as a lot of people know, the the middle of the NL is gigantic. We have, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams who are 5.5 games out of a playoff spot and then dropping all the way down. The Nationals in the back of that club at 5.5 behind. Then it's a huge drop down to the Marlins at 15 behind. And so, I think that the path is there, right? Like there's so much volatility in the rankings where just one win or one loss can mean so much. I think now that James Woods is up and he's looking to do great things, I think you obviously Abrams is going to continue to do what he's doing. There's a real path, and I think in Gore and how he's done. I think he's taking the leap that we all kind of foresaw a little bit, that none of us are super surprised by it, but this is a team where in a month, like, they're going to be right in that mix. I think there's a couple teams in that sort of middle territory, that very large valley, that they have a real chance to surpass. Because they're just really exciting. They're really fast. They have a good blend of contact power. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people when we get to like late August, early September.
Oh, I 100% agree. And as somebody that has James Wood, C.J. Abrams, and Jake Irvin on his fantasy team, I couldn't agree more. I will say though, no, the Nationals have definitely surprised me. I feel like their young team is really fun to watch, and I really am excited to see if this team can take that leap. And even if they don't, they are in fantastic position to be a playoff team for the next multiple years. Even if they don't make that leap this year, I mean, they are. I mean, it's just, they have a really young team. They're all going to be here. And then you look at it like Dylan Cruz should be up soon, right? Dylan Cruz will probably be up soon. And you look at, and like they have other top prospects, Brady House. He could be making his MLB debut soon. So just there's a ton of players that, are right there in their organization that has a chance to be really good, that they could be very good for the next few years. So I like the Nationals a lot. Mm-hmm. And so that award goes to the Nationals. Congratulations to the Nationals on winning the They Couldn't They award. Mm-hmm. And now we go to our third award, which is the Not So ESPN Friendly Award. This goes, and I will explain this. Anders created it again, but I will explain this one. This goes to the player that maybe isn't in the biggest market. He isn't a power hitter that had 60 home runs. He's not a stolen base mastermind that just is so fast that he makes highlight plays every single day, and you're like, you have to get this guy on a highlight film. He's just insanely good. And heck, this award probably would have gone to Luis Arias last year at the All-Star break. But this one goes to, we're sticking in the Guardian side. This goes to Stephen Kwan. Look at that great man right there. That is Stephen Kwan. because most of you guys probably don't know what he looks like because, to be honest, he's not on TV ever. So, yes, this is Stephen Kwan. If you guys don't know who Stephen Kwan is, you guys are living under a rock this season because, to be honest, he has probably been one of the best players in the entire league and just not being talked about. He's hitting, I think, 367. And he has like insane contact. Very rarely strikes out. And he's just been so good this year that he won the starting left field job, which is a really hard job to land at the All-Star game. An outfield starter is a very hard job to land when you have, outfield big names all over the place. But he landed it. He got the left field position. He's the starting left fielder for the All-Star game. He's just been so good this year and so surprisingly good. I don't think a lot of people expected Stephen Kwan to do what he's doing now, especially after having a little bit of a rough year last year. He wasn't bad last year by any means, but he had a little bit of a rough year last year, and we kind of assumed maybe he would kind of fall off a cliff a little bit, and he's done the opposite. He's jumped up a cliff. And so, yes, that would be Stephen Kwan. Anders, can I get your thoughts on the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen Kwan?
No, he looks great. Everything you said is correct, and he's bounced back in a great way. And to the spirit of the award, I think he is the kind of player where he gets a little bit of, an asterisk with the market that he's in. I feel like if you took exactly who Kwan is in every single fashion and fiber and just put him in a Dodgers uniform, then we would be discussing him in a consistent way as one of like the next great young players in the sport, in the same way that we do with Acuna and Rodriguez, and Tatis and all of those guys. I feel like there were multiple points. I mean, I know we had a down year last year, but there were a lot of times where, I would hear James Outman be discussed more than Stephen Kwan, which I thought was always kind of disappointing. But no, good for him. I mean, he's a real. I know it's easy to look at Ramirez, but he's a really core component of why they're doing what they're doing. And again, like, he's done a season, not maybe quite this good, but flirting with this territory before. And so these are repeatable skills for him individually. I know it's really difficult and it's kind of a little bit intellectually dishonest to call someone who is the starting left fielder, as Zach said, for the All-Star game underrated. I think that's sort of difficult to pull off, calling someone in that territory but I would say under-discussed is a very appropriate and firm title for him, and he's been really impressive. And I actually thought that last year was more indicative of who he actually was, and he totally proved me wrong.
Absolutely. And like I said, I respect Stephen Kwan. I think, it was kind of hard for him, especially early in his career, because he kind of came in around that same time as Luis Ariz. Like, him and the Luis Ariz kind of came at the same time, and he was kind of discussed as like the mini Luis Ariz, because Luis Ariz was doing things on a bigger scale, especially last year, right? Like, last year, Luis Ariz nearly was hitting 400 at the All-Star break last year, and people were like, this guy's incredible. Stephen Kwan's been doing that for 3 years also. Last year, he had a rough year, but like for 2 years ago, when Luis Ariz led the entire majors in batting average, Stephen Kwan was right up there with it. I mean, he was hitting above 300 as well. So he's been doing this for a while. I respect Stephen Kwan as much as a Twins fan can respect the Guardians player. I respect Stephen Kwan. Which moves on to our next award, which is an award that was for me, and that is his Living His Best Life Award. This is the award that I created that goes to the player who is not only absolutely dominating on the field, but dominating off the field as well. And this goes to the one and only man who I think is probably one of the coolest guys in sports at this point, Paul Skeens. Look at that photo. Doesn't that look like a photo of a man who is living his best life? Um, no, this is Paul Skeens. If you guys, and I've been told Paul Skeens at this point, but Paul Skeens was the number 1 draft pick in last year's draft. He flew up the system. He finally made his debut this year after he started dating the Livy Dunn, who many of people know as gymnast of LSU. And he is really living his best life. He just made it he literally has played in like 10 games this year and is already an all-star. And is being considered for an all-star starter, as well as pretty much the favorite to win Rookie of the Year in the NL already. And he's just doing things that we've never seen. Like and it's all warranted as well. Like everything he's gotten so far in terms of all-star, possibly a starter, Rookie of the Year favorite in only 10 games, completely warranted. What he's done in those 10 games has been something we've never seen before. To start a career as much as Paul Skeens has done this. So I think Paul Skeens is living his best life. Anders, can you agree with that?
I do agree. I do have an honorable mention for this award. But I will say, yes, Paul Skeens, I think is like really someone that, him and Dylan Cruz together. I mean, it was a cooperation, I would say, but they sort of brought college baseball had it bleed into the mainstream, right? In a certain way, and that takes a lot of power. That takes a lot of star power, and it's you expected a certain momentum to carry over for him. I did not anticipate it to happen this quickly. I think the Livy Dunn component, it makes him the center of a lot of memes, and he's the center of a lot of memes anyway. Maybe it's because of just certain traits that he has. Maybe it's the mustache. Who knows? But maybe it's probably a combination of a lot of those things. But no, I mean, it's very rare that you see sports personalities out there in the world advocate for someone to kind of be pushed in a certain way in the world of baseball. And, that's kind of boiling down to even a specific game where, people saying that Paul Skeens to this point doesn't have, has more pull power than someone like Aaron Nola, right? Like, or, Tariq Skubal or, someone like that, right? So, so it's great. He's young, like it's such a cool existence. I would say the other person that I kind of thought of for this award was Bryce Harper. I think that the Phillies kind of have this sort of like, I don't like the word aura. I think a lot of people use it as like sort of a way to justify like baseless sports arguments. But the whole Citizens Bank Park, like the way that it just looks like, that's the first sentence where like I really like understand what people mean when they say that. And he's kind of at the forefront of that now. And, there's a chance where, it's Judge and Ohtani are kind of at the top, but I would say that he's probably really close to that in terms of recognizability on a global level. I also have heard the take a lot that Bryce Harper is living Mike Trout's dream. And the with how good the Phillies are doing and how fun they are to watch, especially at home, I kind of see that. But Skeens is just on a totally different level, just from a social media standpoint and so many things that are unique to him. It's so fun, and it's just really cool. I'm really happy to see him succeeding in the kind of fun way that he is.
And I mean, he has a chance to he's already being talked about as like a top 10 pitcher in the game, even higher than that in some cases. And it's just crazy to see that rise so fast. I'm excited to see if he can, keep this up, like where he goes, because he's looking like he's already kind of on that track of like, he's looking on the track of he could be one of the best pitchers we've ever seen. And I think he's very much, he has that. I don't know if you feel it. He has this kind of he has that like Jacob DeGrom early career feel already, where like people are calling Jacob DeGrom like the best pitcher of all time, prime Jacob DeGrom and stuff, and it already feels like Paul Skeens on that track, as well.
And in a
Yeah.
year, in a year where so many prominent starting pitchers have gone down because of injury, him showing up and just being himself, essentially picking up right where he left off from LSU, it's great for the sport. It's super refreshing, and I think having someone like that come into a smaller market like Pittsburgh and kind of injecting it and the attention that he brings to that team from a media perspective allows for the opportunities to highlight people like Jared Jones and Mitch Keller, other young good pitchers that they have on that team. So I hope that the Pirates are buyers at the deadline. Like that's another kind of side thing is like, this is the only, you don't know when you're going to have Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller all healthy and pitching at the top of their games at the same time like they are now. And so I would try to make the most of that in these next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Anders, I'm going to switch the slide, but I'm going to let you completely do this next one because this was yours. This is your award. I did not have any creative liberty in this award at all. This is all Anders.
That's what I think it is. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Guys, this is an easy one. It's meme of the year. When we look back at this and we see all those slideshows that people make on TikTok where it's like, hey, do you remember when this happened? Guys, there is no other correct answer. Zach, show them the slide. Guys, come on. This is like it's unbelievable. And of course it happened to the Mets. This is probably it's the most Mets thing that can possibly happen. It's the most Mets winning streak that could possibly exist. I swear to God, because Mets fans, I get it. There's some miserableness there. But, I mean, a lot of teams go on a winning streak, and it's like, it's like, oh, that's great. Like, I feel better about where we were. Like, there's, like, the fact that you can have the rush of going on, like, a 7-game win streak in a tight NL while just doing this, like, running joke. The joke would be funny if it was a 7-game losing streak and it was like the Grimace curse. Like that would be just as fun. So between all of that, it's the most Mets thing that could possibly happen. And it's great. It's such a, because this, I feel like we kind of got off to the year on kind of a darker tone with like Strider going down and Acuna going down and the Astros and Rangers not being as great and, a lot of bad taste in people's mouths with the Ohtani stuff. Like, this is just so fun. Like, it was so hysterical. And it's the most Mets thing that could possibly happen. This exact thing could have happened and you could like rank all 30 teams of how just fitting it would be. The Mets are number one, and some of it I can explain, some of it I can't, but everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say that.
I will add on here. This is awesome. I didn't get to like experience this too much. I didn't even know it was happening. I'm going to be completely honest. However, I will like to throw an honorable mention out to the Twins summer sausage. In the Twins summer sausage that led to our 12-game winning streak. And just the memes that came with the fact that the Twins had a old sausage in their bags for a full month span. That was very incredible, and I remember that, and that was very fun to watch as well. But I agree, this was awesome. And I've been a part of group chats that were going crazy when this was happening. So, I agree. Anders, now we go to a fun one here for us. One that we took a lot of people into consideration for this award. Yeah. There were a lot of people in consideration. And so that would be the quadruple A MVP. Anders, take it away.
This is a co-award for me and Zach. It's kind of intuitive, but the phrase triple A, a quadruple A baseball player is essentially someone. It describes someone who is, you can kind of figure it out, who's like technically in the majors, but is just not great either because they just kind of sit there to take up a spot, and they're kind of just on the fringe, and so it's one way to feel about it when it's a younger person who's kind of only been caught up maybe a little bit prematurely because of injuries to certain positions and things like that. We see that happen all the time with starting pitchers, all the time. But I think it's more funny, and this is what the MVP part comes in, when it's an older and more established player who kind of gets into that territory. And there were about 4 or 5 guys that Zach and I were considering for this, but we kind of landed on, I think, the best one, honestly.
And we would like to also confirm they do not need to currently be in the majors right now.
Right.
They could have already been sent down at this point, but we're so bad for a majority of the year, and we're just kind of taking up that spot that they had to be included. And so This is where we land on Jose Abreu. What a fall this guy's had. What a fall from grace this guy's had. Obviously, we all know the story of Jose Abreu. Most people know it at this point. He's been so bad for the Astros since they brought him up. He kind of redeemed himself late last year. He had a pretty good end of the year last year, but he's been so bad this year. In 113 at-bats, Anders, Jose Abreu, who is a power hitter, has a 124 batting average with 2 home runs, a 167 OBP, a 195 slugging, a 361 OPS, and a negative 1.6 WAR. I mean, just historically bad stats. I mean, stats that you can't even imagine how bad they are. And another guy that we will say we included in this award was Spencer Torkelson. He was kind of our next up.
Yep.
He also just got sent down by the Tigers, but he was being historically bad. But because the Astros are a much more notable franchise than the Tigers, we went with Jose Abreu here. Just historically bad for Jose Abreu.
That's I think we landed on the right guy. Just because because of how high his ceiling was too. I would say also, Torkelson was there. I think it kind of just got to, the Tigers, I mean, they were expected to maybe compete for a wild card spot this year, but they never got there. So I figured with how young he is, it would kind of only make sense just to let him be taught in the majors. But that clearly didn't happen, which I don't really agree with. But the other person, there are a couple other people that we wanted to mention. One that I've mentioned was Dalton Varsho, because of he is doing awful. He's batting 196. I'm not even sure if he has a 600 OPS, and he's a power hitter. But it's the fact that the Diamondbacks got 2 players in exchange from Yolanda Gurriel and Gabriel Moreno, both of them significantly better than Varsho. So, the fact that he's attached to that trade kind of makes it worse, and it all makes sense. It all kind of works together with how poor the Blue Jays have been doing, which has been so great to see. I did not mention this to Zach. I almost as well. This is kind of cheating a little bit. I did think about suggesting Jackson Holiday for this award.
Yikes!
Just because I know it's kind of vicious on him, but he had such
a bad first stint in the majors that it is warranted, because the hype around him was so high and he was dominating at AAA. I mean, he was at a point where you couldn't keep him down there anymore. Right. And then to come to the majors and have 1 hit in I think it was 15 at bats?
Yeah.
Or 60 at bats and have like a lot of strikeouts and just not be anywhere near what you were thought to be, and then be sent down a week into your first major league stint, which most people assumed would be the last time he got called up, like the last time he needed to be called up. It was. I understand why he'd be considered here, although I do feel it's vicious giving a guy who
and then also
is as young as him.
Yeah, also
because he will be back up and he will be good.
Right. No, but that's the thing that I was thinking. I do think he's going to be good too, but now it's kind of strange because, like, now the path, and I would like your take on this, Zach. Now the path for him to be called up is not as clear because the whole it's right. It's kind of a weird path. It's not. I'm not sure how you approach that because, like, you called him up because he was doing as good as you can do in AAA essentially, and so he reached the threshold to be recalled. So it's not like he can do any better, really. I know that his striking out metrics were sort of the main pillar for why he didn't make the roster at the start of the year. So maybe that's what they're specifically monitoring, but like in terms of just a lot of the more kind of surface level sabermetric stats, like you can't really do that much better than what he was doing when he got called up. So like, does he need to like surpass that to get called back up? And like, how long is that going to take? Right. It's kind of weird. I don't really know how you approach him now that you kind of, because all that stuff that you saw, like, I mean, it is statistically a little out of variance, but you can't unsee it.
No, I don't know either. To be honest, I have no opinion. Like, I haven't even been paying attention to the A's AAA team recently, so I don't know how he's performing AAA right now. And if he's kind of been back to where we expected him to be, in AAA. But like, it was such a bad first impression that it is really hard to get that taste out of your mouth. It's really hard to like look at him again and be like, I mean, he'd have to come back if he came back to the majors and struggled again. I mean, you'd have to be a little worried.
Right.
But
and it's like I said earlier, like with Torkelson, like I am a very big believer in general, in a vacuum, I would say, in people learning in the majors and getting experience learning from the major league level staffs.
Yeah.
However, I do understand this a little bit more because the Orioles are in a much more win now better position to compete in the playoffs and obviously.
And again, you have to remember, right? Like Jackson Holiday, he plays second base. Like second base is his position. Who do the Orioles have at second base right now?
I believe Ramon Urias. Is it Urias or Mateo?
They have Jorge Mateo. Mateo,
okay.
And Mateo is not great either. Like Mateo's not doing fantastic at second either. He's 229 of the 5 home runs.
Right.
But he's more of a veteran. He's fast. He's got that speed.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard for me to understand what Jackson Holiday would need to do to get called back up now. And this is where I'd ask Bibbo and be like, Bibbo, what's your thought on what Jackson Holiday would need to do to get called back up? But I don't know. It's very hard to like lose that first sight though. That first impression was so bad.
Yeah.
And like it's hard to believe. Like it's hard to like really get out of your mouth until you see him perform better in the majors. So he would need to get into the majors and perform well immediately for it really to lose that first impression. But anyway, so that's our quadruple A MVP winner. Congrats to Jose Abreu for winning quadruple A MVP. Although I don't know if congratulations are in order or if welcome to Japan is in order, but who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we go to our next award here, and I'll have you explain this one as well. The I don't understand what I'm doing here award.
Yeah, so this is basically just for like a confusing team. This is for a team where it's this, you know, the what I'm doing here is kind of phrased as this team, people associated with this team saying this sentence out loud. The way I would phrase it is like, this is the award that goes to the team where if someone comes up to you and says, hey, what do you think of the blank? What do you think of this team? And you kind of have to think, like sit there and process, and you go like, what do I think of the so-and-so? Either because you don't have much to say or because you have so many things, smaller things to say that they kind of just like conflict with each other. Just a confusing all around baseball team. And I think that the team that we have for this is very appropriate. Zach, if you would do the honors.
I would like to do the honors. Welcome back, the Grimace Mets.
The Grimace Mets, yeah. We should have did some Photoshop, make this thing purple in some kind of way. But yeah, no, the Mets are, I guess, one of a handful of teams in the NL. Like I said earlier, excuse me. God, I'm dehydrated. all this gum that I'm chewing. I'm gonna put this down actually.
Good idea.
I'm gonna become fully physically available to discuss the Grimace Mets because it's a very physically demanding task. That kind of the big middle of the NL, where it's very easy for a lot of teams in that area to talk themselves into buying when they really shouldn't be. And I was someone at the beginning of the year thought that they should have traded Pete Alonso. I don't believe that any Mets fans seriously think that they're a World Series contender. Now, as we hear the ambulance outside, excuse me, very distracting. They've decided to keep him. It does not look like they're going to be trading him at the deadline. I realistically would. It's kind of, the Mets didn't really do anything to win now for this season in terms of free agency acquisition. They kind of wanted to keep their money in play for Max Fried and Juan Soto and Corbin Burns and that kind of cluster. But they're one of those kind of big time contracts is going to be going to Pete Alonso, and some of the Pete Alonso is a notorious Scott Boras client, and that will the amount of money that he's reportedly asked for is more than what the kind of that player in a vacuum, regardless of position, would call for, and what more specifically what the first baseman market calls for as well. Now he's having a down year this year, despite making the All-Star game, which is bizarre. And so maybe that number comes down a little bit to a number that, the Mets and their new, regime is comfortable with. But it's like, yeah, like, are they competing? Are they not? They're like expensive, but it's not really going anywhere because it's so much dead cap money. But then like they're having these like weird surges from like Iglesias, and like JD Martinez is doing really well. But then you also sent like Brett Beatty down, and like I don't really. It feels like they could do. There are 5 or 6 different things that they could do at this deadline in the offseason, and I would not feel 100% confident going to any of them, because if you re-sign Pete, then there's a lot of these guys that you're not going to be able to afford to get. So I'm kind of getting confused just talking about it, which kind of proves the point of why they won this award.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're 45 and 45. They're right on the midpoint line. I mean, I think they're the only team in the MLB that's technically currently exactly at 500. And to be fair, like, again, this is a team I thought was going to be kind of like a selling team this whole year. I really thought they might be like a tanking team, kind of go for a top draft pick. in this upcoming in next year's draft, which I believe is expected to be a lot more exciting than this one. And I don't know. I feel like the Mets are. I don't know what they're doing either. And to be honest, I really don't know.
That's kind of the picture, right?
Yeah, like I don't know what they're doing here. I don't understand what they're doing here. But no, it is weird. The Mets are, I think they should trade Pete Alonso. It doesn't sound like they're going to. I think they should.
Yeah.
I think this team is ready for a complete rebuild after the disastrous situation happened last year, in which they signed all these high-level guys for a lot of money and none of them worked out. And I think I think the Mets are ready for a complete rebuild. I feel like getting rid of Pete Alonso is the first step to that. That's that. I think that's the Mets. And now we go to our final award of the show. Another award that I created, the I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. We all know that phrase. We all know it. And this we are giving to the player who we were going to do a more younger player kind of that maybe was like struggling. We were just giving the player who we think has been the most disappointing player. But we wanted to kind of go veteran specifically. And, we didn't feel right giving it. I will say some of the names that I thought immediately were like Corbin Carroll. I didn't feel right giving Corbin Carroll it, although I will say he's been very disappointing this year. His stats are really bad compared to being Rookie of the Year last year and a possible MVP.
Right.
His stats are really bad this year. And so I was considering Corbin Carroll. We decided not to. Another guy we were considering is Blake Snell. We did not give it to Blake Snell. Instead, we gave it to Dansby Swanson. And I'll let you go first on this. Dansby Swanson has been disappointing, man.
I know. Yeah, Dansby Swanson. I had a lot of really high expectations for the Cubs this year. I picked them to win the division at the start of the year. I thought that they were a legitimate candidate to win 90 games despite the improvements that we were seeing from Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. And I also thought that St. Louis would not bounce back in the way they have. So I thought that I thought the path to 90 wins for them was very promising and very realistic and pretty much very straightforward. And flatly, it just hasn't been that way, which kind of sucks because Shota Imanaga has been great, but they haven't really they took a step last year. They were so close to the playoffs and kind of dropped it. They didn't really need to go that much further to get where they wanted to be. And so I thought that, you brought Swanson there, you paid all this money to him to kind of be the sort of nucleus of that, like at the shortstop position, kind of leading that defense and, kind of be the kind of cohesive force to kind of bring together, Morel and Suzuki and Pete Crow Armstrong and all these guys. And, be a very comfortable someone to make Shota Imanaga first year pitching in the MLB very comfortable. And he's just been flatly disappointing. And I think that, he has been sort of a microcosm of the team a little bit. And now, they're in a position to be sellers. I know that, Seiya Suzuki has been a topic of trade discussions. Buyers pursuing him to kind of clear room for Pete Crow Armstrong at the center field position. But yeah, I mean, you got to pick a play. This award really should go to the Cubs as a whole, but I put Dansby here because of how established he is and how trustworthy he's been, and I kind of viewed him as sort of being the not tire of this sort of not super experienced but very talented group, and he just kind of fell flat in all of the good pitching that the Cubs have had this year. They haven't been able to capitalize on offense, and it kind of because I think baseball's in a really good spot when the Cubs are doing really good. And I thought this was the year where we would get them on the playoff stage, and it just hasn't come to that.
I mean, I will say this. Yeah, I'm looking at his stats. He has a 201 batting average, 8 home runs, 276 OBP, 335 slugging, 611 OPS, and a .8 WAR, which for a shortstop is just not good.
Right.
Essentially, as good a shortstop as he is, a .8 WAR is not good. So I would say I would agree with this. His stats are very disappointing. He has been a veteran. He's been one of the more consistent players you could always count on. Yeah, he's been very disappointing this year. So I think, when I came up with this award, I mean, he wasn't the first guy I had in mind, but I agree. I think he should be in there. But I would like to give that honorable mention to Blake Snell, and an honorable mention as well to Corbin Carroll. Although Corbin Carroll's been bouncing back recently, so that's why I don't want to include him, is he's been kind of catching back on his track recently. But Blake Snell's been one of the worst pitchers in baseball, and he sat out for so long, and he's been one of the worst pitchers in baseball. So I would like to give an honorable mention to Blake Snell. Yep. But Dansby Swanson wins our final nerdy of the night. And we want to thank you guys for joining us for our award show here tonight. This was a pleasure. We enjoyed it.
This was a pleasure.
I love this. I love doing this. So absolutely tune in next time where we will go into more NFL content and get back into NFL content, as well as if anything major else happens in free agency, we'll be there to break it down. But for the most part, thank you all for listening. We are very excited to be here, and enjoy your All-Star break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.